Yeah. Oh, is this mic working? I think so. Good morning, everybody. What a privilege to be here on such a glorious day. I think we'd rather be outside, but hopefully we can go outside afterwards. Well, it's my great honor to have, I was kind of the train conductor is all I came as, bringing these two amazing gentlemen on the train to you here in Ossining. But it's my extraordinary privilege to be able to introduce both Mauricio and Peter and a little bit about why they are here and who they are. I'll let them tell the full tale, but I think this is an amazing moment for two men so involved in the Amazon and creating networks there to be connected to an mission. I've been a Maryknoll lay missioner. I was a Maryknoll lay missioner for 21 years. Now I work with the Office of Global Concerns, and I've had the privilege of know a little bit this network in the Amazon, the network helped a bit about this network of people in the basin in the country. They've created a network of the people of the Amazon and the Catholic Church, and the combination of these two people is what made it happen. Peter Hughes, that some of you know, is a Colombian priest who's been from Ireland, who's been in Peru for 55 years. He carries with him that incredible option for the poor of the church that has just been so extraordinary, and that Maryknoll was such a friend of Gustavo Gutierrez and many theologians. And he's also been in part of the Latin American Bishops' Conference. That he connected with Mauricio Lopez, a really shining light, a shining star. Mauricio defines himself as Mexico, adopted by Ecuador, but what is the part of the Amazon? It's Amazonian by vocation. Yeah, you'll find out why. But Mauricio, I can't think of anything he almost hasn't done, so I'm not quite sure what to tell you. Formed, in by the Jesuits in Mexico, and had the privilege of traveling all around Latin America, and in that realized the extraordinary opportunity, the extraordinary fact that the Catholic Church is present, as we know, among so many poor and isolated communities, but the power of coming together and raising those voices, connecting, is just an extraordinary presence of the Church of the Holy Spirit. And so he really wove those connections, and together they created what's called the REPAM, the Pan American Amazonian Network. And out of that came, really, was it the first synod, the Synod of the Amazon? They were the movers and shakers of the Synod of the Amazon that took place in 2019. That Pope Francis was very much, he was the one that had this come about along with these gentlemen. And out of that led to other synods, and currently Mauricio is a coordinator of the of the synod. You're coordinator of the organizers of the synod, facilitators of the synod. So again, it's just a real privilege to have them here to share about the cries of the poor, the cries of the earth in the Amazon, and share their story. Mauricio has done so much, but he keeps creating. He connects and he creates. So he helped create this Latin American network, but he's also created the University of the Amazon, which is bringing university studies to people in the Amazon. And that's one of his current main roles, and I think a lot of his focus will be, so I'm sorry to forget that most important part.
Well, thank you very much for the possibility of sharing with you this morning. And first of all, because we've had the privilege of walking and sharing with the Maryknoll missionaries, the Maryknoll sisters, the Maryknoll fathers, brothers, and the lay missionaries for so many years. You've always welcomed us in here, and you've made us feel at home every time. In Washington, when we've had some advocacy activities there and reaching out to Congress representatives so people from the Amazon, indigenous peoples themselves can speak out, and also welcoming us in your house in Manhattan, where we just had yesterday a meeting where the indigenous leaders themselves could talk to the special rapporteur of the UN on indigenous affairs, and the way he felt at home at your house, and how those indigenous leaders felt also at home there, and something beautiful happened. And I think that's what we're all about, trying to connect the dots of those fragmented presences, but in the world that we are living, and how fragmentation is the central element, how important it is to continue to create possibilities for communion. So thank you for that. And last year I had a privilege to be here with Father Frank. We came here to visit Brother Tony, and I want to bring the memory of all of those missionaries, men and women of Maryknoll, who have devoted their lives for mission. And for me, Brother Tony, we are from the same region in Mexico, and we would spend some time sharing about memories, and we have the same last name, so half of Mexico has our last name, Lopez, but we called each other family. So I had a chance to see him last year, and well, I'm sure that he and many more are looking after us from where they are. So thank you very, very much for the invitation. I'd like to thank Lisa for helping us prepare this, and I'd like to thank also Father Peter Hughes, who's a brother in mission. We'll be sharing, I think, in a very informal way, because you also hold a lot of the experience of mission that we want to have this sharing experience. I'll be talking a little bit about why the Amazon is so important for the planet, and some of the challenges that we are going through and people are going through there, and the mission of the church. And Father Peter will talk about this milestone, which was and still is the Amazon Synod, and its implications for the church. And as Lisa was saying, we hope to share a little bit about what we are doing these days to connect with that networking experience of over a decade, and the creation of the university program, which came out as a mandate of the Synod. When people say synods do not produce anything, we can share and show with our experiences that that's not true. That the creation of a new unprecedented structure in the Catholic Church, the Ecclesial Conference of the Amazon, where indigenous leaders, women and men, are part of that structure, and this is recognized by the Holy See, that tells you that something, even though little by little, is changing. And this university program is also a way to respond to what we've been listening to in the past years, to try to respond and accompany the struggles and the hopes of the people. So this image for me is really, really important and relevant. The hands of God, female hands, protective hands, but also worn out by working and serving. And this phrase from the Mayas of the Popol Vuh, I think it really portrays what's happening in the Amazon these years. They took our fruits, they cut our branches, they burned our trunks, but they could not kill our roots. This is very much about keeping the roots alive, even in these difficult times that you know so much about in your different areas of mission. And why not a quotation from Teilhard de Chardin, who was not really well understood back in his days. And he said, and I think it really portrays what we are discovering as church these years, but which comes from the very, very roots of the peoples, and it's been there for centuries. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and this changes everything. The sense of sacredness and the sense of incarnation that we've heard from the indigenous peoples, and that we hear from them every day, and how threatened that is by this struggle between a throwaway culture and a culture of encounter. I think that's what we are facing these days. And in Laudato Si, Pope Francis, recollecting the experience of the church on the ground, he presented this category of cultural ecology, where he invites us to recognize the historic, the artistic, and the cultural patrimony, which is likewise under threat. It's not only their lives, but also it's their history, their wisdom, their spirituality. And in this sense, it is essential to show special care for those indigenous communities and their traditions. For them, land is not a commodity. Now the world looks at it as a commodity, as a place to exploit, but rather a gift from God, a sacred space. I don't know if you noticed in the Amazon Synod, this theological category, which was very inspiring, and Pope Francis endorsed it, the Amazon as a theological place, as an incarnational place, as many other places, of course, but and Father Peter will talk about that, but in a way it shows how the world, the wisdom and the beauty of the world is under threat, but at the same time how the responses might come from there. If we listen to that, if we listen to them, we might find a way without opposing each other to try to find different responses which have this perspective. So what's really interesting these years is that the Amazon region came from being the backyard of the planet. No one really cared about it. Of course, the missionaries and the people who lived there, but countries did not really look at it as something important, and now it became the main square. The interest of it is pretty much around this reality of how it is coveted and disrupted. So what is our prophetic mission there? What is the call that we have as church? So some elements that you might already know about, but as Lisa was mentioning, there are 9 countries integrating this biome, this ecosystem. So 8 countries in South America, and then another extraterritorial place, France, the French Guiana, which is also part of this reality and making it even more complex. It's about more than 7 million square kilometers. It's huge. I'm from Mexico, so this is 7 times the territory of Mexico. And it includes, as you might know, Brazil. Most of the people think about the Amazon and they think of Brazil. Certainly, and I was hearing about that, I was delighted to hear about that when the Maryknoll missionaries had to leave China. The first place where they went to as part of the mission was in the Amazon, the Beni and Pando. So I was really touched by that. Your mission in this side of the world started out in the Amazon, and that's why I know how important this place of mission it is for you. That's what makes it also a theological place. It's more than 9 countries and many other realities, but it's a place of our mission. Something that I always tell people when we go around and say, this is important for you, it's important for the planet, but they say, I've never been there. That's very far away from me. What do I have to do with the Amazon? And I always say, 1 out of 5 glasses of water that you drink, you owe it to the Amazon. 1 out of 5 glasses of water you drink every day, in a way, is connected to the Amazon. So it's a way to present that 20% of the water that is not frozen and that people can consume is produced in this living system, which is a fragile system. So there is a connection there. There is some scientific discussion, but some even say that 1 out of 4 breaths you take also is produced in the Amazon, 25% of the oxygen. Now some scientists say that this is an oxygen that is produced and then also consumed by the ecosystem. But again, the symbol is important. We rely on that land. It's not only about these exotic perception of the Amazon, but how it is connected with the future of the planet. And certainly that's why Pope Francis has paid so much attention to this reality. It's more than 1,000 main tributaries of the river converging, speaking about communion. They don't have roads. I mean, they do, but it's a huge territory. The rivers connect. They make life possible. When those rivers are polluted, and this is happening more and more as a result of illegal mining and many other things, they don't serve anymore as a source of life, but the other way around. And we've seen that in many illegal mining is increasing in Peru and in many places. 1/3 of the total biodiversity is there in the Amazon. So that's more than 30% of the genetic stock of the planet. But more importantly, the people who live there. This is not an empty space. Sometimes they make us think that this is an empty space. It's about 45 people living there. Certainly, the transition is happening right now. 70% of the people are living in cities, and that's really putting a lot of pressure on the life dynamics and on the indigenous people's identities. But indigenous peoples, out of those 45 million, about 3 million come from indigenous communities. That's about 400 different nationalities with identity, culture, spirituality, history, tradition, and about 240 languages spoken. So we have Father Frank there in Manhattan. So he is a beautiful scholar on linguistics, and he talks about how important this is to preserve identities and cultures, and this is also being lost. But this is not something that works. It is a miracle, but we can break it. It's a giant water pump. So when you have all of the forest there, this water pump functions, and it produces this dynamic of creating life and water. They call it the flying rivers. They carry more water on the clouds and this system than on the surface. But what happens with deforestation, this pump starts to malfunction, and if we continue as we are, it will come a day, and some regions in the Amazon are so deforested that the water pump is not working anymore. Some say that when we pass the point of no return of 25% of deforestation of the Amazon, the water pump will break. So today, these days, we're close to 20% of the area of the Amazon with deforestation. So it's a very serious matter. And also in geopolitics, so the main geopolitical region of the planet continues to be the Middle East because of the petroleum, but the second geopolitical area of importance of the planet becomes the Amazon. Water, resources, the genetic stock, and none of that has to do with trying to protect the beauty of the place and the identities of the people. This idea of being the yard and becoming the main square has to do with this. So a difficult time is coming for us in the future. So here are some images of the Amazon that I will share with you later on. I want to pass the word to Father Peter, who will be talking about the Amazon Synod, and then I'll come back to tell you a little bit more about the current mission that we have. Just a couple of quotes from Pope Francis. The first is from Laudato Si. He already talks about this theological place there, and he says, let us mention, for example, those richly biodiverse lungs of our planet, which are the Amazon and the Congo basins, or the great aquifers and glaciers. We know how important these are for the entire Earth and for the future of humanity. We cannot fail to praise the commitment of international agencies and civil society organizations which draw public attention to these issues and offer critical cooperation. What we're doing these days, thanks to you at the UN, is also connected to this, the international organizations which are serving this purpose. And where we are not the spokespersons of the indigenous peoples, they are there. You might wonder why they're not here, but that's because they're talking at the UN today, and in a way we wanted to share with you also what's happening there. And then finally, Pope Francis in Rio de Janeiro said, the church is not in the Amazon like someone with their bags packed, ready to leave after exploiting it. She has been there since the beginning with missionaries, religious congregations, priests, laity, and bishops, and her presence is decisive for the region. And then finally, Teilhard de Chardin again. Each element of the cosmos is woven with all of the others. It is impossible to break this network. The universe is held by its unity. The unity of the universe is at stake, and the Amazon is not the only one, but it holds great importance as a challenge, but also as hope. But the church has done a very interesting journey there, so I'll invite Father Peter Hughes to share a little bit of the experience in the Amazon Synod.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. And for me, as a Colombian coming to Maryknoll, it's like coming home a little bit. We've shared the journey together, and of course, I knew many, many good Maryknoll missionaries, great friends, particularly in the Altiplano, in Juli, and also in Bolivia. Yeah. So I've been asked to say something to you in the short time available about the Synod of the Amazon and the challenges and the doors that it has opened and the difficulties, but particularly the possibilities. So the first thing I would have to say is that we must remember that the first time when Francis was elected, when he came back to Latin America, it was just 4 months after he was elected in March 2013. And he came in the context of the youth meeting. That year it was held in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. And there were two very important moments. One was his meeting with the Brazilian bishops. And on the following day he met with the bishops' board of CELAM in Latin America. And on both occasions, he focused on and stressed for him, newly elected Pope, the importance of the Amazon for the world, the climatic importance of the Amazon. And he really stressed that point. And later the Synod would say, the Amazon is careening in an out-of-bounds way towards destruction. The rainforest is being destroyed. The people's lands are being taken from them. The Amazon is no longer a place of beauty and plenitude. It's now a place of destruction and violence. So the Pope was very, very worried before he was elected and very interested in the Amazon and to preserve it, to defend the life, the gift of God expressed in that wonderful biome, that wonderful place. And he said things that are very, very striking. He said, we as a Catholic Church must play a new role, keeping in mind that the Church has had missionaries in the Amazon from colonial times who are very heroic people and did wonderful things, and it was always considered a very, very important and difficult vocation through the centuries, we might say. Yeah. And now, because of falling numbers, particularly of religious orders who work there, and the lack of vocations, and the advance of other Christian groups, maybe not too concerned about the rainforest or the issues that we're concerned about, we're in a new phase as regards our presence and as regards our mission there. So he said, we must play a role there. We're not the only ones. There are many groups from different parts of the world who are doing things to save the Amazon. But he used a very important word when he said, we must be, the Spanish speakers will understand what I'm going to say, what the Pope said, we must be corajudo. Yeah? We must really go for it, take risks. It's a popular word from Buenos Aires, where the Pope is from, to express his well thought out and particularly his emotional involvement in what the Church should be doing to save the Amazon. So corajudo was something to do something new, to begin again, and to really think out and to do a new type of evangelization with the huge challenges that the Amazon poses to us. So anyway, he did say in those two meetings as well, that for him, the future of the Church in Latin America will be judged on what the Church is able to do to save the Amazon. And this was very much in the context of his spirituality, in the context of the Amazon being a wonderful gift of God, where life is expressed to the full, and now the same life, God's gift, is being destroyed. And the destruction of the Amazon has tremendous repercussions on the rest of the planet. The final document of the Synod says, if the Amazon is lost, and we've heard now that 20% of it is already lost, this will have catastrophic consequences for the whole planet. That's the bad part of it. So anyway, after that, we came together as REPAM was in existence. From there on in, we were kind of parallel. The Pope coming on the scene with his election in 2013, and the same year, a number of us that were in different positions at the time in the Church in Latin America, including Mauricio, came together and we thought out the importance of trying to build a new network, a knitting together of people, groups, congregations, sisters, priests, people on the ground, bishops, and trying to have a new presence based on networking. Try to face up to the challenges of the huge distances and isolation of missionaries all over the place. So REPAM was founded the following year in 2014 and have an immediate sort of impact in the Amazon territory. Very well received. It was a unique experience in the sense that very often we missionaries know to be some resistance and even opposition to good things that people might start. But Repam was something kind of unique, where there was no resistance, there was no opposition. It was kind of all systems go from the beginning. Anyway, in the year 2017, we began to feel that there was a need of a bigger meeting of the church in the Amazon. 105 vicariates, bishops, jurisdictions, right? Half of them in Brazil, the other half in the other countries. So the idea began to surface that there was a need for a synod. And at that stage, the Pope had already arranged a visit to Chile in the beginning of the following year, 2018. But when different groups of bishops from the different churches of the Amazon were doing their ad limina visits to Rome, they mentioned and stated the Pope that a synod was necessary. So the idea came from the bottom up, and from Repam. And the Pope took it on board immediately, and he convoked the synod in April of 2017, and the synod was inaugurated in January of the following year, 2018, in Puerto Maldonado, in the Amazon part of Peru, right? Both Mauricio and I were there. We were up in the top seat. The inauguration was fantastic. It was like a beautiful display of indigenous peoples from different parts of the Amazon with their headdresses and with their cultural dress. And at the back of the hall, on one side, you had bishops, and on the other side, you had civil society, important people, politicians, etc. And where the Pope stood in his address to inaugurate the synod, he was accompanied by about 20 people who were either in wheelchairs or had crutches, or were people that had been injured and people who had been threatened by so-called mining accidents in the Amazon. Accidents that are not accidents really. So when the Pope says we need to do something, he was speaking from the heart, and he was surrounded by people who showed physical signs of destruction. He said, the synod is going to begin at 5 o'clock here this afternoon. So very important, very striking how the Pope comes from the center of the church, historical, spiritual, comes to the periphery and says, we have to begin again from the place where and where people are not recognized as such. Then the following year, through all the process, the synod is unique in that during quite a number of very good meetings of bishops with their peoples, over 50 territorial meetings and 30-something thematic meetings on specific points and issues. 80,000 people's voices were recorded. And if we examine what was said and recorded during those meetings, which was a tremendous consultation process, totally new, and the Pope very much insisted that we listen, that we've been very wonderful as a Catholic Church from apostolic times to speak, to talk, to give sermons, retreats, write books. Yeah, we're the people that do all the talking. The people, the laity particularly, are the ones that have to listen and put what we say into practice. Here, the whole roles were reversed. The Pope says to the people with authority in the church, authority in the sense of the roles that we have, it's now time to listen. So please try and listen. And that's why the people spoke up. And they spoke from the heart about two things. The first one was the terrible disaster effects that the mining companies, the big international powerful consortia of mining, and the oil companies had on the Amazon, as destroying the land, the rivers, contamination, destruction. And they said, we're going to die. We're already dying. The water is contaminated. The fish are destroyed. The mercury that's used in mining operations is absolutely deadly. Women and children are particularly vulnerable to cancer. Yeah? And our lands are being taken away from us. Yeah? So the ecosystem is being destroyed. The death of the biodiversity of the Amazon is in huge danger. So that was the voice of the people. And that was the important thing about the Synod of the Amazon. Now for us, this was a huge spiritual experience. To listen to the people with the perspective of incarnation spirituality, with an understanding that this was God's creation, beautiful world, being absolutely destroyed, and God's people being absolutely helpless to prevent the destruction. So that was the main thrust and the backbone of the Synod, the preparation. And from there, the Synod was prepared, the documents, etc., etc. And the actual Synod in Rome began it was held in October of 2019, the following year, right? Now, I asked Mauricio to replay that slide that he showed in the early part of his presentation, because at the beginning, the first day, which was a Monday morning, first week in October, yeah, there was obviously a big special mass that the Pope celebrated on the Sunday, big formal mass, beautiful Gregorian chant, wonderful display. But we were all said we had to convene in St. Peter's Basilica at 9 o'clock the following morning, ready for work, right? And I was there fairly early, at about 7:30 in the morning. And it was kind of strange to see a circle of Amazonic people. Some of them were going to participate in the Synod itself, others not. But they made a big circle in the interior, just in front of the high altar in St. Peter's. And in their own way, using their own customs, they began to have a little kind of ritual dance, both men and women. And as people were arriving for the work session, for the opening of the Synod, they joined the circle. Yeah. The Swiss guards and the papal guards were very nervous. What's this sort of stuff happening here? This doesn't sell here, right? So as time was going on, towards 9, maybe from about 7:30 further on, the bishops were arriving. They knew how to arrive late. They were sort of professionals on the job, like, you know. At this stage, the Amazon people were gaining in confidence, And they were really, kind of, in a very quiet way, no screaming, no shouting, but some of them had little drums, and everything was going great. And I remember, some Roman cardinals, guys from the Vatican itself, were arriving, and they were absolutely shocked. And a woman from the Amazon would say, "Come on, Cardinal, join the dance." So, and they were absolutely astonished. When the Pope came out, he was smiling from ear to ear. He loved it. His preparation was going to be to intone sit Creator Spiritus in Latin, and say the opening prayers in Latin, stuff like that. So without consulting anybody, straight away he got into the stream of things, the joy, the spirit, speaking in Spanish, talking in Spanish. People took over with their own cantos and everything like that. And then there was a canoe appeared on the scene, It was about 2 meters long or so. And there was a procession from the hall, from St. Peter's to the Synod Hall, right? Just right down through the Basilica and a few 100 meters across the plaza to the hall. So it was like any kind of a procession that you would have in Lima or San Pablo, Chimbote, lo que sea. People praying, cantos, smiling, And instead of a saint, they had the canoe on their shoulders. So you can see the canoe there. This was what I'm saying on the entry into the Synod Hall. So that created the environment for the Synod itself. Now, I have to be very quick now because my time is up. The 4 weeks of what happened in the Synod Hall were the Pope and the bishops retaking and revisiting what they had heard from their own people about the negative impact about the so-called extractive organizations. And the second thing was, how can the Catholic Church respond to this? How can the Catholic Church face up to the challenge that the extractive industries are doing to the destruction of life, of the territory and the peoples of the Amazon? So that was the challenge. And that's what the Synod dealt with. And they came up with a wonderful final document that opened doors, underlined very, very important things. Maybe people in the West were looking for more things like women's ordination and very important things like that. But I think what the Synod did achieve was underline the importance of things like integral ecology, the importance of human rights, that we all are very comfortable talking about human dignity, but when it comes to expressing human dignity that implies rights, it's a step further on. So we must revise the way we read the New Testament, our theology, and understand particularly that we're speaking about a God that's present, incarnate, the Emmanuel, living in our world, suffering in our world, and announcing new life in our world. The most important meeting before the Synod was held in Georgetown University in March of the previous year, where there was quite a number of very, very forward, good-thinking cardinals from all over the world, maybe about 10 of them or so, and a number of leaders. And in Georgetown, for 3 days, we had a great sharing. It was kind of an opener for the synod between these two groups, about 100 people present at the meeting. That made a huge impact and created very important public opinion as regards the importance of the synod itself. I would end up saying that we have surfaced more in hindsight, but have to be kind of continually kept in mind and revisited. And it's very important for us as missionaries and people engaged in evangelization in general terms. One is what I've already expressed. The synod was something where the center, represented by Pope Francis, came from the center, the power of the church, the history of the church, the structure of the church, comes to the periphery and inaugurates there one event. And he says to the people, we must listen to you. Yeah. It was like Jesus saying, we must listen to the pain of the people who are left out, who are not recognized, whose lives are being destroyed, and we want to listen to you. So that was the first movement, the church listening to the people. After all that period of preparation and listening, the Amazon itself goes to the center. There you have it on the slide. All those people are Amazonic people. So they go to Rome. There was 200 meetings in the evenings and the night times over the space of a month, organized by these people in Rome, as a support of the people's hopes, desires, dreams about the synod. The document that was drawn up was the document that we all were involved with, absolutely convinced that we had to listen deeply to the voice of the Spirit. And this is new for us. There's a wonderful paragraph in a very short document that the Pope brought out the previous year called Communio Episcopalis, number 6, those of you that are interested in documents. But in a number 6 lines, the Pope uses the word how to listen 6 times. And it's about how to listen to the voice of the Spirit present in listening to the people of God. How to discern the voice of the Spirit. And we can only do that by listening in a faithful way to the people, their pain, where they are. So when the 4 weeks were over, the document was redacted and passed and everything like that. That was the second movement of the synod, what happened in Rome, revisiting the listening in another environment, more formal, more official, and the final passing of the document. The territory becomes empowered with the Spirit, not a physical, not a political power, but a Spirit-filled power. And then the Pope says, go back to where you came from and put into practice what have we've been talking about. Do it. It was like the texts in the Gospels when the apostles look at the ascension up to heaven and the angels point out, it's not about looking up to heaven. It's like, go back to Galilee and do and say what you heard Jesus doing and saying. So it's a new Pentecost that we're talking about. So anyway, that's what the synod was all about. And that synod itself empowered the Pope to do the whole process of the Latin American Assembly of the Church in Latin America that went on in the first part of COVID, many of you will remember. And particularly it has inspired the whole question, the big question about synod and synodality as the way the church should be and should act. Engaging in a synodal camino, which means talking to one another and trying to find out a way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Peter, and we'd like to have some time to hear from you as well. So I think it's important to understand that there are some steps forward after this experience. I remember very well at the end of the session in Rome that we sat together with Cardinal Humes. We lost him about 1.5 years ago, and he was a very important presence in the church. He was the one sitting next to Pope Francis when the voting procedures were reaching the moment for him to become Pope, and he's the one who told him, do not forget about the poor. And then he says that that's when the name Francis came to his head and his heart. Some thought that he was Saint Francis Xavier because of the Jesuit identity, but he was Saint Francis of Assisi, the poor missionary serving our sister Mother Earth and giving his life for the service of the others. So in this sense, one of the things that we discussed at the end, it was we need to maintain this that's been REPAM. We need to make sure that this new way of connecting the dots and the people in the Amazon, it needs to continue to respond, and this is what we're doing these days at the UN, so people can be subjects of their own history. The church will fail or will have failed unless they become subjects of history. The second element that came out was the creation of the new structure in the Hello. Okay.
So this other initiative has begun, and it's called the ECCLESIAL Conference of the Amazon. 2 indigenous women are vice presidents of that structure. Priest from the Amazon and myself as a layman. And the president of this conference is Cardinal Pedro Barret, who's been a big presence in this process. And it's become a formal way to offer and enable the ministerial proposals to continue moving forward in this experience. The Amazon right that was proposed in the final document, there is a group discussing that. The ministerial church, the ministries for women, ministries for laymen, the integral ecology ministry, those are being discussed, and it should be, and it could only take place in a formal structure in the church. This ECCLESIAL Conference of the Amazon, it is unprecedented from what we know in the church, has official recognition from the church, thanks to Pope Francis. And the third element that we've been focusing on is the University Amazon program. The people who are here at the UN, whom we've been accompanying for many years, repeatedly have expressed this need to have formal education so they can continue defending their land, their peoples, and to be able to offer this kind of response to their communities. But we couldn't do that in a traditional way. It's not about bringing a new university in a capital city in the Amazon, Manaus, which is a metropolis of 2 million people. There are enough universities there. The problem is that they do not respond to these intercultural challenges. They don't respond to those who are the most excluded. And by no means they manage to get there where the peoples are. So this has been the discussion over the past years, how a university that goes out, that goes forth. How can we understand that this is not a university with a mission, but a mission with a university? We never sat down to think about the university just because we thought in a small desk in a capital city this would make a difference, but because people on the ground have been repeatedly asking for a response where we can offer higher education, and so therefore they can continue responding to the dynamics where they are. So thank God, and fortunately the Jesuits working with the refugees in very complex areas, they've created a platform where the university programs are made available for the people in those refugee camps, and with the recognition of the universities, the Catholic universities, with all of their experience, and they are offered where people are with a completely different way to approach in an intercultural perspective. So that's what we've been doing these past years. That's what we're working on also. And I'm very grateful that Pope Francis is endorsing and accompanying this initiative, the Dicastery for Integral Human Development. I'm a part of that dicastery, but also the dicastery for culture and education. They're encouraging us to continue going forward. I know that this is a key mission for the Maryknoll family. That's why we wanted to share with you this. And the idea is to offer what you call here in the United States college-level education, not undergrad education. So people who have been educated by many of the religious congregations in the communities can have access to that. So this is a platform, it's not a building, where you can bring the formation, and we're developing the programs with the participation of the people on the ground, so it responds to their realities, and with the presence of a facilitator on the ground, the process will take place in their communities. Now, we have many Catholic universities in Latin America who have never managed to get out there and to respond to the people. Just a very few of them, indigenous peoples, managed to get out and go into the cities, and many times they won't be able to go back to their communities. There is such a huge change in the perspective education they get, and many of them will not succeed because this Western type of education will not respond to their reality. So we are creating content with the huge challenge of, at the same time, fulfilling the requirements of the legal structures and norms of higher education. But this has been coming repeatedly in the process of the So we are now in the process of identifying the places where we'll be creating the learning community centers. Now there are missionaries. That's why when we had a discussion with some of the Amazon to identify possibilities of responding there. And at this point, we have 5 focal points in the Amazon. One is in Puerto Maldonado, Peru, next to the border of Bolivia, where the Maryknoll missionaries started the mission in Latin America. In the triple border of Colombia, Peru, and Brazil, Leticia, Tabatinga, and Santa Rosa. In Manaus, but not in the city, but in the outskirts of Manaus, where the indigenous peoples live. More than 70,000 indigenous people live in Manaus, from 30 or 35 different nationalities with no access to higher education, elementary, secondary formation, they receive many times through the Catholic Church. The next is not there, and also so through the devices, computers, tablets, cell phones, which most of them have. This is not for a offer of education. It's for those community leaders, indigenous leaders, pastoral leaders, stay where they are. And right now we're focusing in one technical program, which is integral management in Spanish. From 1,000 people that we've through so one program. So we are not educating lawyers, but human rights promoters. So as we've been doing in the past year, they can come to the UN, to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, so they can go to the local structures and advocate for their own rights. They're already doing that, but they need to be also in a way acknowledged in that knowledge so they can respond. Integral and intercultural health, so they can become promoters of health that represents the good living that they are aiming for. Intercultural cultural education, peace building, ecotourism, social analysis to understand the reality of the Amazon from their own perspective, and also project management, so they can actually stay there and create possibilities for them to stay. We still have a long way to go, but I'm very grateful with the different Catholic universities, the Amazon countries, who will be certifying that formation, which is not an easy thing to do. And we're already working with institutions in Venezuela, even in that very difficult situation, with the Andrés Bello University. In Ecuador, where we are based, with the Pontifical Catholic University. In Peru, the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. In Brazil, with the Pontifical University of Rio de Janeiro. And in Bolivia, we just began the conversations with the Catholic University, the Bolivian Catholic University. And then Colombia, with the Eudistas congregation. They have a university that's called Uniminuto, the Minuto de Dios, which really is the only experience that I know of that is a university on its way out. Really, we call it in Spanish, Universidad en Salida, really responding in those places where nobody else, because they started working with communities, and as we are doing, the university was a consequence of working with people. We never thought about a business model of a university, but it really came about from listening to the people. So these 6 countries, we will begin the process. Now, internet connection is of course a problem, but now we see everywhere with Starlink this possibility to access to internet. And the beauty of it, as I said, this started in refugee camps in Ethiopia, Afghanistan, and in many places where there was no access to higher education. Universities, Catholic certified those students so they could be able to continue serving their community, but there's no need for permanent connection. So it only takes about 1 hour per week for them to download the materials that are being developed, and then to upload the work that they do. They will have a facilitator in each community. We will begin with these 5 places that I was telling you about. And what we see is that, in a way, it responds to the signs of the times and the transition on education. I think now we are seeing a different perspective on how education, in the past it was seen as a lower level, all of this hybrid kind of education or virtual education, but that's probably the only way to reach out to them. Otherwise, we take them out from their communities. If they want to do that and if they have the resources, of course they're entitled to do that, but many of them stay there. Most of them are women who have to take care of their families, and they could not continue studying to serve the community. They already make a difference there, but in order for them to to work in the community building, they need this kind of formation. So it's a long-term process. It is the result of this experience, but certainly we feel that this will be an opportunity for us to serve more directly, and so they can be, as I said, subjects of their own history. This is what Cardinal Gomez always said. We will have failed as church unless they become subjects of their own history. Educational, spiritual, ecological, economic, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you a short video of this campaign that which is connected to the work we're doing here with REPAM these days, with those who are present in areas. And they also is with honesty. Some people, some anthropologists, and they're right. They said we need to strengthen their capacities, their identities, and their perspective, especially youth. But at the same time, we need to get English also as a second language, so they can come here and advocate for themselves, and together with strengthening their capacities of the local language, so they can also advocate for themselves in this reality of a globalized world. So we'd like to share that video to finish this sharing, and then hear from you, because you have a lot of experience on the ground. We brought some material as well on this university program. We'd like to get to know about it, and certainly thanks to the General Council, we'll give you some material. If people from the Maryknoll family might be interested on this and have a possibility to help in different ways, of course, we'll be very, very grateful for that. So here's the video. It's a 3-minute video, very short.
Juntos por la Amazonía, juntos por el futuro, es la universitaria UAM con la que queremos para que podamos
Well, we will leave it here. So perhaps voice for themselves how to really request becomes very crucial. So as that happens with the tax already taxed to leave after exploiting it. It needs to continue to be there, and anyway, it is about enabling them to be able to be the subjects of their own history. So perhaps if some of you are interested, we wrote this material that after the session we'd like to share with you. There is some information about it, and certainly we'd be very grateful for your help with that. And thank you for this morning. And hopefully some of you who work in the Amazon, I know many of you might have also sharing to offer.
A quick thought, about 20 years ago, there was a movie put out, an IMAX movie about the Amazon. And it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, I knew a little bit. I was in Bolivia for a while for language school, traveled to Peru and worked in Central America. But this was a story about a campesino with people leaving Machu Picchu, going through Peru into Brazil and down the Amazon River. And it gave a real appreciation to the land, the people, the animals, the forest, and all that kind of stuff. You know? So if you get a chance, I forget the name of it exactly, but really wonderful to get an appreciation. And I think because it's IMAX, it's so intense, I think it's only about 45 minutes long.